Hey, everybody. If you're listening to this, you are listening to the first free hour of this episode of The Shift with Doug McKenty. If you like what you're hearing, please consider subscribing to the show in order to access the full feature-length versions of the podcast, as well as have access to the members forum, where we discuss potential topics and interviews and dive deep into the overall concept of the shift. For only $6 a month, not only do you get the full-length episodes, but also an opportunity to co-create with me, your host, Doug McKenty, the future of the show. Go to www.theshiftnow.com or patreon.com/theshift and sign up today in order to help make the shift possible. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Good morning, noon, or night, whenever and wherever you are listening to The Shift. I'm your host. My name is Doug McKenty. This episode was recorded on August 21st, 2021. My guest on the program today is the Accidental Psychonaut, Mary Ditton. Mary is a massage therapist and Ayurvedic practitioner who spent 5 years working at the Awakening in the Dream House, Ibogaine clinic, now located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. Ibogaine is a powerful African psychedelic associated with opioid addiction cessation and has been used for decades to help many thousands of addicts begin their journey to recovery. Despite its successes, Ibogaine is still classified as a Schedule I drug in the United States, and as such, medical research and use of the substance remains illegal. Addicts are forced to travel internationally to make use of this effective treatment, and improved protocols are difficult to develop in an atmosphere characterized by government control. While Mary's primary professional experience centered around Ibogaine, her personal life has been profoundly affected by the use of entheogens whose powerful plant medicine altered her path from a young age. This conversation will include discussion about multiple experiences with a variety of medicines, their effect on the human body, and the messages they impart to each individual utilizing these tools for health and education. Stay tuned for a conversation concerning a variety of substances including magic mushrooms, peyote, and ayahuasca, as well as a deep dive into the Ibogaine healing experience. Mary has participated in traditional ceremonial use of many of these change agents, as well as developed deep understanding of modern scientific applications of these substances as they slowly make their way back into the psyche of civilization. Hear these stories and more as this conversation delves into Mary's decades-long exploration into the world of plant medicine and the powerful lessons these substances impart to those willing to take the journey. Find out more about her work at the Accidental Psychonaut channel on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on your favorite social media network. We rely on listeners like you to help with distribution of this important information. Go to www.theshiftnow.com for hours of free content, to sign up for the newsletter, or subscribe for feature-length versions of the episodes to help support the show. I want to thank Psychonaut Mary Ditton for agreeing to this interview, and thank you for helping to make the shift. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 89th episode of The Shift. I'm your host, Doug McKenty. I'm happy to be joined today by Mary Ditton. This is a kind of a special episode for me because so often I'm talking to people that are promoting a book or a documentary, or somebody that I had to search hard for on the internet to figure out how to have a conversation about a topic. And this one is very serendipitous. I've been wanting to talk about Ibogaine and entheogens for a long time on the show. And Great Spirit just happened to drop Mary in my lap. She's a member of my community, and I met her at a political event last week, and we just hit it off. And she was talking about the topic that I've been wanting to talk about for, as I said, for quite some time. So thank you so much, Mary, for coming on this show. And just to let my audience know, her YouTube channel is called The Accidental Psychonaut. So do you want to tell people a little bit about your history and then why you named your YouTube channel The Accidental Psychonaut?
Sure, Doug. Sure. Thank you. Well, I told you that many people discouraged me from the title, The Accidental Psychonaut. So accident is, it implies something negative, but really, in this case, it was referring to me falling into the experience I had when I was 23 in 1978. And I do discuss that on my channel. It was with a very large, I didn't know for decades that it was called a master mushroom, but anyway,
Ah,
it was a large mushroom. I was 23, and I was going to throw the mushroom in the trash because I really didn't know what it was supposed to do. I had some vague idea, but I didn't want to hurt the guy's feelings who gave it to me.
right.
Fred, Fred, and he said he warned me, like, this is for three people. He said that several times. And at the time, I really didn't know two other people, but I did mention it to a coworker of mine, at the the restaurant I was working in at the time, and he said, wait a minute, no, I'll do that with you." And I said, "Yeah, but we need a third person." And he said, "Well, my boyfriend has a great apartment." So we ended up experiencing this in a New York City apartment, of all things. Looking back, it's funny to me that that was my
Right.
really mind-blowing experience, because I left my body through the top of my head, and I did not know about chakras or really anything much to do with,
Right.
certainly not to do with Hinduism or any. I was very, I think, very focused on my career, which was to be a Broadway gypsy dancer, actor. I studied theater in college, and I had I had this appointment with a well, my agent gave me a list of things that I needed to fix. Keep in mind, it was the time when Chorus Line was playing on Broadway, and there's this famous tune, "Tits and Ass." Tits and ass won't get you jobs unless they're yours. Okay, that's one of the
Right,
lyrics,
right.
right? Bum 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 ba ba dum. So, at that age, at 23, I was all about, like, I am going to, like, get the right size boobs. And one thing he told me was, you need to thin out that peasant nose.
Oh,
I was gonna save
wow.
that for last.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was gonna do all the things he gave me. He gave me a list, but I was starting with the boobs, and I had an appointment in mid-January to do these boobs. The
No
last
kidding.
thing. Oh yes, the last thing this agent screamed at me as I left his office was, "Don't go too big."
Oh, man.
So this mushroom, where I leave my body, and I am, as green could be, and I'm with Don. I remember Don very well. He was my friend at La Groceria restaurant in the West Village of New York,
Mm.
1978. And his boyfriend had the great apartment. And, all I can say, to keep the story short, was basically my spirit left through what I later knew was a crown chakra, But
Yeah.
I didn't know about chakras. I just knew I left through the top of my head.
Quite the introduction to the other side, huh?
Oh yes, yes, and that was such a joy for me, because I wasn't scared. Like, not once during the experience was I scared till the very end, when I was trying to see if I could, like, hurl myself through the wall, because I was bored being in the apartment after a
Mm.
couple of hours, I suppose. And I thought, gee, how do I do this? But then I thought about my parents, because it was Christmas Eve, and it was
Oh,
the Christmas Eve, the first one that I didn't go home to Philadelphia. My father told me, "Don't worry about it. The weather was really bad." He says, "Just come, come when you can." He was really fine about it. I love, I have a very tight family, so I was thinking, wow, if I get out of this apartment and I can't get back in, and I can't get back in my body. I remember thinking that my parents would be devastated. And I remember thinking about the person that would have to clean up the body.
oh
Like, that
yeah.
was I was just thinking, oh, that's sad, to find a
Right.
dead body. And I just didn't want my parents to go through that. But other than that, I seemed perfectly fine. So, there I was at age 23. And then, of course, after the experience was over, I wanted to repeat it like right
Oh,
away.
yeah.
Like, I was like, holy crap, I'm not my body. Wow. So I sought to repeat it. And you know how it often goes. You get like one green card,
Yeah.
and then it's like you have like a bunch of like even bad trips where you're like, wait, this isn't, I want that other one. I want that other trip that I got the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how it went. And basically, so that was monumental. I did cancel my appointment for the boob job.
Right.
That I'm so happy for,
In hindsight, yeah, probably for
Yeah,
the
I did.
best.
I canceled all that, and I changed actually the course of my life.
Yeah.
I changed my life, and I waited literally 30 years to where I felt I was in a space in my life where my son was going to college. I had another boy that was like an adopted son. He was also in the Navy. And I really didn't have anyone depending on me. And I wanted to have another big experience. I was searching for that. And so that's why I got involved with the Ibogaine community.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so, yeah, talk about that. Tell the audience about that, because this is, I think, going to be the focus of the interview,
Mm-hmm.
which is the 5 years that you spent in Mexico helping people with their addiction problems through Ibogaine. So how did you get started with that?
Right. Well, the internet, I was on the internet like everybody, at the time, researching like what are the ways to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought about peyote because I knew you could go somewhere in, I believe it was New Mexico, and you just had to be a member of a church. I had some options. I thought about ayahuasca. But then I saw on the internet that this man, Howard Lotsoff, lived in Staten Island, and he was the father of Ibogaine. He's known as the father of Ibogaine,
Mm-hmm.
So I called him up. His number was there, and I said, I told him, look, I am looking to find perhaps employment. Maybe I can be of help. I do body work. I am certified in Ayurveda. I like to cook. I can do anything to help your clinic. Do you think that I could possibly work in an Ibogaine clinic? And he gave me the number
Wow.
of Richie Ogilnick. At the time, Richie was calling himself Eric Taub. Okay. And he still has his same website, which is ibeginagain.org. And actually, I wrote down his phone number because it was great. I got a chance to call Richie, knowing I was going to do this
Mm-hmm.
podcast. So, should I say his phone number just for
Uh,
anyone, or do you do?
yeah, I don't think so. I could probably, if
Oh,
If
okay.
Richie gives us permission, I can put it in the show notes.
Oh, he did. He gave me permission,
Okay.
but anyway, he
Well,
can
if
be
you,
found.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't need to give his phone number because people can find his website, which is
I'll put the website on in the show notes. Yeah.
okay. Okay, ibeginagain.org. So
Great.
yeah, he was the one that Howard recommended. And
Okay.
so I called him, and he thought I was with the FDA.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he thought. And so he happened to be in New York when I called him. I thought he was in Florida,
Hmm.
and because that's where the website said he was, where he lived. So he happened to be in New York at the time, and he said he was going to send his cousin Frankie over to meet me and interview me, but it was him, you see. So
Ah.
he came to where I was working. I was taking care of one of my massage clients who was probably in her mid 90s. So I started when she was 90, and I served her till her death. She was 97 when she passed. And this plays into my whole relationship with not just Ibogaine, but certainly with ayahuasca. So here I was, I'm working in a job which was only supposed to last 2 years, because she was in such poor health. But now she's like 96, and I've been there 6 years, and
Oh,
I'm
wow.
kind of climbing the walls. Like, I'm feeling like a reluctant Sherpa. I really couldn't leave her. She didn't have anybody but me, and her son lived in California. He was very grateful that I was doing this, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he came to where I was working, and he immediately saw that I was for real, I believe. But he told me later he found it fascinating how much I knew just from researching online about, not just about Ibogaine, but about him. I was like, oh yeah, Richie used to sell jewelry and blah, blah, blah. So, and he has a brother-in-law who's a heroin addict, and that's why he got it, because I read everything.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was how I met Richie Ogilnick, and he's still providing treatment. And he was the one in the 90s who went to Cameroon and ended up getting Howard Lotsoff's leftover Ibogaine. I guess Howard had found another source, and he brought it back. I'll let him tell that story because it's a great story of his trip to Cameroon and coming back, and how he brought it in, et cetera, et cetera.
Will you just tell people a little bit about the history of Ibogaine, and then what it's used for in terms of addiction, and how it's used on people that have addictive disorders?
Yes. So I always recommend people, if they want to know about Ibogaine, to watch a documentary film. It's on YouTube. It's 50 minutes, and it's very well made. And it's called Ibogaine: Rite of Passage. The young man, well, he was young at the time. Now he's, I don't know, he must be in his 40s. Ben DeLunen, he runs an organization called ICEERS, ICEERS, and it's an acronym for the International Conference of Ethnobotanical Education, Research, and Services. But he's really great. He was the one I ended up going to Colombia with, ultimately. So what is Ibogaine? Ibogaine is the active alkaloid of the iboga. So the iboga is a shrub. It grows in West Equatorial Africa, in the countries of Gabon, Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, the Congo is really difficult to deal with. Most people were dealing with either Cameroon or Gabon. During the time that I was in Mexico, Gabon declared the exportation of iboga to be illegal, but hey, people were still probably getting it from Gabon. I never dealt with that aspect. I worked at the Awakening in the Dream House at the time, and Rocky Caravelli was the director. At that time, I was there. So back to Ibogaine.
This was in... just to let people know, Awakening in the Dream House is in Mexico. Clearly, this Ibogaine treatment is illegal in the United States to this day.
Yes.
So
to this day, it's a class 1. It's illegal. So I knew I would go. I decided I would go either to Canada or Mexico. But anyway, let me get back to finishing with what is Ibogaine. So if you think of the sacred plants, or some people call them entheogens, I like that name because it refers to the connection with spirit, creator, the God, whatever you want to call it. So, if you think about mushrooms, for instance, psilocybin. Psilocin is the active alkaloid. With peyote, it's mescaline, and with ayahuasca, it's DMT. With iboga, it's ibogaine. Now, the reason that there is such a disparity, if you're going to drink ayahuasca, you're drinking it just like the natives do. But if you're going to take iboga the way the natives, the indigenous, and the Bwiti pygmy do, you ain't going to do it. I'll tell you why. You're going to have to eat a crap load of, it looks like sawdust, because the active ingredients of the shrub are in the root bark, specifically the second shavings of the root bark.
Yeah.
And so if you see a plate of it, you watched the documentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you see that it looks like
it looked like a bit of an ordeal. The initiate had to eat quite a bit of it.
Yes. And there's a lot of vomiting. Of course, people misunderstand a lot about, well, I would say there's a lot to explain about all of the, the processes.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just stick to Ibogaine.
And you were saying that you experienced that experience with Ibogaine, the traditional experience, as well as
yes. Well,
the experience in the Western experience. I mean, there's a little bit of a comparison and contrast between the traditional use and then the Western use.
Yes, I had both. I mean, I was there 5 years, and but to finish up with, what I was making the analogy of, let's say DMT is to ayahuasca as Ibogaine. That's the active alkaloid, but during the time I was in Mexico, they started to use other alkaloids, and they called it the TA, which is total alkaloid. And so they were trying to make a more, let's say, robust treatment that wasn't so pinpointed on the Ibogaine. All of this was experimental. Yeah, this was all, this is pioneering work. Even today, all of the work that's being done with introducing, well, peyote, actually, they were working a lot with peyote for alcoholism for decades, but people don't know about that. Ayahuasca, it's being used legally here with the daime to treat. It's not often sort of advertised as an addiction thing, but of course it's implied because any kind of, let's say, lack of health, could involve substance abuse, maybe not, but, so how we did it in the years I was there, and I believe that how they're still doing it, is they'd have addiction categories, and then they'd have the psychospiritual sessions that they offered for people who weren't necessarily addicted to substances. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the funny, I love telling this because it was so true. The funny part about our psychospiritual sessions is we often said we would put a sign up, no more psychospiritual sessions. We can't deal with these people, and, we want the addicts, bring the addicts in, please, so right. We had some tough customers in both arenas, but we would laugh about it. And anyway, I could tell you a million stories.
Right.
I hope I'm explaining what Ibogaine is. It's it was originally manufactured by the French as a mountain climbing aid, and I think it was called Lambarine after a city in Gabon. But as it is with a lot of the sacred plants, they can't patent it. And when they tried to do that with Ibogaine, I won't mention any names, but they're because it's really, I'd rather not. But there were people, and we used to laugh about it, scientists and doctors wanting to get those nasty visions out. We can cure you without those inconvenient visions.
Right. Yes. They were trying to figure out how to extract like the spiritual experience from the active ingredient or whatever, so that they could. Yeah, that's fascinating actually to think about.
Isn't it though? It's so modern.
Yeah.
So modern. anyway, so that was, you know, Ibogaine had a reputation of working particularly well with opiates because, you know, the scientists who did studies, they would say that Ibogaine fits into the same receptors as the opiates in the brain, and so.
And now it actually, like, if an opiate addict is typically withdrawals are going to be harsh and they're going to last days, but with Ibogaine, they have the Ibogaine experience, which is about a day or two long, and then they actually don't have that same like harsh withdrawal. Is that correct?
That is a very, I would say, wishful thinking, but let me clarify, because, you know, we once had, just to illustrate a point, we had a Mexican man who did not speak English very well, and he was memorable because we used to do one treatment a month for the Mexican community as a thank you to them, and also to establish bonds with that community. And we started in Sayulita and we moved to San Pancho, which is San Francisco, Mexico, in the state of Nayarit, anyway, north of Puerto Vallarta. So we had this Mexican man, and he came and he said, he had a little bit of English. He goes, "Oh, you're going to give me pill. I'm going to sleep and I'll wake up. No more addiction." You know,
right.
So we had to show him, explain to him. I didn't speak good enough Spanish, but we got somebody to just hip him. And then we showed him, you know, the vomiting, the insomnia. I mean, I think for some people, and this is really interesting, like, for instance, if you were just a plain old heroin addict and you didn't complicate things by having methadone in your system or OxyContin, or you didn't take Valium, hey, that was a piece of cake, because heroin is, it would leave the body quickly. Now, the body is just the body. Okay, the physical body being detoxed, ain't it, kid? There's the mental and emotional. So that is the arena. So initially, our treatment was like a week, and this is in 2007 when I arrived. We were just doing a week, and people. You know, then we realized, okay, we got to do 2 weeks, and then we realized, hey, let's create an aftercare. And that's when we were doing 3 to a month. Many people stayed months if they could. That was beautiful because they got a good result.
Well, let's delineate between, I mean, you know, the first week after somebody is in cessation from an opiate, and then you're going to have like the severe withdrawals that happen at that point. And then clearly, then there's another longer period of time that happens after that. In terms of the emotional healing that needs to take place.
Let me paint a little bit clearer picture, Doug. So people would have to be screened for liver problems and heart issues. They'd have to have an EKG, a liver panel. I mean, there was screening that they had to do, because Ibogaine is very tough on the body, especially the heart and the liver. Okay, so once they passed that hurdle, they would bring their drugs down with them. We would, you know, go through, they would come in, they'd have to recover from their trip. They'd have to have at least a good night's rest. And we would, you know, obviously take their drugs. We found out that people would hide the drugs, which is very dangerous. I mean, so we had to find a method to say, look, we want drugs. If you're hiding them, it's on you. You know, we went through quite a learning curve. It was so. Then what we would do is we would get them into the state of withdrawal, and we would give them a test dose.
Okay.
This was all to see that they were going to receive it. Now, Rocky had a lot of years of experience as a as an Ibogaine provider, but he had a ton of experience as a drug addict. So he was really good with emergencies. Amazing, amazing. I mean, we had quite a few.
Huh.
In fact, Earl, I think my first month there, we had a cardiac arrest. Now, at that time, San Pancho Hospital, they were doing cardiac arrest manually. They were doing CPR. They didn't have the machine, the thumper, or anything. So this doctor that we had, Dr. Jose Luis, he did manual CPR until we got to Puerto Vallarta, which is 40 minutes at the least away. To that hospital, transferred this guy. He was one of the first treatments. So I say I was lucky because my first 2 or 3 treatments were very dramatic. Things went really horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But thank God nobody passed. And this guy that I'm describing had the cardiac arrest was, he grew up in India as a Hare Krishna. And he got hooked on heroin in India, and he was on methadone for, I think, about 20 years, maybe more than 20 years. And that is one of the most difficult detoxes. This isn't another subject, but it's really, I think, important for people to know about, which is methadone, and now it's Suboxone. They really stay in the cells. And, what I learned from Rocky really was that these things should not be meant for you to be a lifer on methadone or Suboxone. They call them lifers.
Yeah.
It's a nice stopgap, but it ruins your body. It's drying, and just like opiates.
This is basically the treatment that they give to people in most of the Western world, right? You're a heroin addict, you're having problems. They're like, here, get on methadone. And it's just kind of a replacement. I guess you don't get as high, but it stops you from going into withdrawals as long as you keep taking it.
Yes. And it devastates the body, and people are led to believe that they have to be lifers, which we started to explore, that you don't have to be a lifer. And that's where we started to develop aftercare. And we were always encouraging people to seek out whatever it was that would help them continue to stay healthy. We didn't use the word clean, Mm-hmm. We didn't use clean. We used harm reduction as an attitude, because there was relapse, and there is relapse,
right?
So much relapse. And,
it's not perfect. I mean, there's something about addiction that, you can have these aids, but ultimately I think people have to decide for themselves that they want to do it sober.
Yep. That's exactly right. And it's different for everyone.
Is it? I mean, if somebody came back maybe and did a second or a third Ibogaine treatment, would does that help? Did many people or most people, were they able to stay off the drugs after that, if they did have a relapse? I mean, does it get better with each experience, or is it still kind of up to the individual? I mean, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, it was pretty much, you could count on, if people were just coming to Mexico, getting, their body detoxed. And even if they stayed, when you return to your life, whatever it is, my God, the triggers are enormous.
Right.
Whether it's your job, your family, the pressure of making a living. There's so many factors that would make people want to use again. So we tried to educate, and of course, I'm sure every good detox program is about what happens after, because especially with Ibogaine, because the visionary aspect could be quite remarkable. Like, literally, Rocky had every question he had answered, and he'd be interesting to talk to. He had relapse. He had relapse. And he describes it as Dracula guarding the blood bank.
Right.
Here's, people coming down for treatment with all their drugs. So he had relapse. Yeah, as well as, and so,
Right.
but we had some remarkable stories of what you'd hope everybody could have, which would be enough love. In the Bwiti tradition of Ibogaine, there's a phrase, it's called Alem Miore. Alem is Alem, and Miore is Myore. And that means one heart only. So they describe that as this, when they do the ceremony in a group, they describe that moment where everyone connects as Alem Miore. And that is where your heart is, is opened, and you're connected with the people that you're taking the iboga with. So I think that has a lot to do with people's recovery. And then I also think that some people just like to dance with the devil.
Yeah. I hear that.
Yeah. So, there was, like I said, so many stories I could tell. There were themes that made the visionary aspect very interesting, But I would say, okay, one theme is the black guy in the room. So if you know about Iboga in its traditional sense, it is part of the ancestral religion of the Bwiti Pygmies of West Equatorial Africa. So once in their lifetime, usually around puberty, they are given a massive dose of the iboga root. And prior to that, they have to fast, much like the Huichols in Mexico who work with peyote. They fast, they prepare for months, they do a confession. Same with the iboga. There's a community confession, like these young men, and in some cases women as well. It depends on the tribe. So they would confess their sins, and they would then begin what is called their initiation. For the males, oftentimes that was preceded by a castration. Not a castration, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant to say.
Circumcision.
A circumcision.
Yeah. Okay. Somehow I knew what you were talking about. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So, yes. And, this Gabonese shaman that we worked with would say it was the guy with the knife and the pepper, the cayenne pepper. Cayenne peppers is styptic. Yeah. And for people who have ever done the master cleanse, it's cayenne pepper. Well, that's an anti-inflammatory, and it heals you internally. It's a styptic heal. So there was the guy, nobody, especially if you were a boy, like that guy. Anyway, so there you go. And so the purpose of this, enormous quantities of iboga, and then they're out for, a week or whatever. The purpose of that is for you to go to the other side and meet with your ancestors. And they call it straightening the arrow. They also call it splitting the head open, which was interesting, very interesting to me because of my crown chakra experience. So, yeah. So this is what they do to grow up, to get that there ain't no Santa Claus,
Right.
And actually, quite a few people that we had come through Ibogaine treatment had in their visions the moment when they learned there was no Santa Claus and how devastated they were. And they
Huh.
saw, that really affected their life. That was
Yeah.
one theme.
I mean, this kind of
You know.
initiation ritual is something that we don't have. I think it's a sad thing. It's a kind of a necessary rite of passage, and it would be
Mhm.
helpful psychologically for all of us. I mean, I guess
Oh,
we
yeah. Yeah.
graduate from high school, but it's not exactly the same.
That's right. That's right. This is very organized and it
Hmm.
has a purpose. It has a very distinct purpose of you ain't a kid anymore. It's time now to like see that you have a purpose, and it's beautiful because like my father used to say, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Right.
So these experiences make you are in the foxhole. And I had that experience with ayahuasca prior to actually joining up in Mexico with the Ibogaine community, and that was totally, I say, serendipitous. I wasn't planning that either,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to do Ibogaine in New York. I was living in New York City because it was illegal, and plus I still had my son at home. I was just,
Right.
So when I got the chance to go to Colombia, and this was in March of 2007, I went to Colombia to drink ayahuasca, and that was the most terrifying experience. And I think probably the best learning experience of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, terrifying, very, very terrifying. And oh, I do want to mention this about both ibogaine, and ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is called la purga, purgation, vomit.
Right.
Okay, so when I had quite a few experiences, but this one, I vomited like a fire hose, like it's been described. I read about people, oh, they vomited like a fire hose. Well, but I never had that but once.
And this is
And
the idea is that you have sickness inside of you, and as you take these drugs, I mean, there's this positive aspect to it that you're eliminating the
yes,
negative energies. Yeah.
yes, you're throwing up is suppressed in the West. Nobody wants to throw up. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, in Ayurveda, vamana is like a curative thing, especially for any disease in your chest, head, asthma, they induce vomiting. Well, it's the same with ayahuasca. You're supposed to vomit. It's la purga. And when I had my, what I call my hallmark experience
Uh-huh.
with the ayahuasca, I saw so many serpents coming out of me. And I don't know if you saw the one video that I posted about my parasite situation. And, but I had, I had a major parasite and it
Wow.
was 2 feet long in my small intestine. And, I had a young, the guy who's my video guy, Zach, he's a young guy. He's a millennial. He's like, Mary, you should title this "A 2-foot worm came out of my ass." I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. No, I don't talk like that. He goes, no, you'll get a lot of hits.
Right.
You know what? I just go with the flow on my channel. I'm embarrassed by a lot of what I see, but you know what? It's all coming from a space of like, I do want to share. And yes, I get embarrassed sometimes when I look at my videos. I'm like, oh my God.
It's pretty personal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's personal. I showed that experience because when I got healed from that it was an intestinal worm.
Mhm.
It was through wormwood. It was through Mother Nature. So it was in a tea that I drank that
Huh.
killed that thing. And the
Right.
doctor here in Fort Bragg said to me, I won't mention her name, but she was very sympathetic. And she said, look, Mary, chances are we wouldn't have found the parasite. And I said, I know. That's why I don't. Yeah, I know. Because really, Western medicine doesn't really discuss parasites too much. Oh no, that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
Well, you're taking your animals through parasite treatment. Your goats, your horses. Well, we're animals, so how come that's so taboo? So anyway, so
Right.
yes, in the ayahuasca, I saw the many serpents in my vomit, which ultimately took me down to the center of the earth. Yeah, it was major league. When I came up, I saw infinity and I experienced my sacred nature. And I realized that I, in fact, was about to accompany, or not accompany, but help someone, this woman I was taking care of. I was going to help her die. And here I was, this little jerk, complaining because I really hated my job a lot of times.
Uh-huh.
It was hard, cleaning up poop all the time. And there I saw myself facing what could be my own death because I thought I was going to die. And I was like, oh, you think you're not going to die? That's what's you're afraid of. Like the ayahuasca was like, oh, you think you want to know if your boyfriend loves you or your whatever.
Right.
No, that's not what's running the show. Here, check it out. You think you're going to live through this? And I was in a state of mortal terror because when I vomited, I was outside the Maloka and I rolled down a hill. I did not know this till I got out of it. And my mouth was full of dirt. I had rolled down a hill. I was by myself for 6
Wow.
hours.
And the
Looking
Maloka is the
infinity.
ceremonial hut where you were doing
That's right.
Mhm.
Yes, there were like at least 25 people there. I went with Ben DeLunen to Colombia, and he was there. He was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what preceded my 5 years with the Ibogaine community.
Okay.
Had I thought I could work with ayahuasca, because that was really what was I call mind medicine. Like that's what actually changed me. Not that I had, I still have, I'm still messing up.
Right.
I'm still messing up.
It doesn't make you perfect.
Yeah, no, it didn't. But it kind of straightened my arrow to say,
Uh-huh.
why do you want to live here, Mary? Why do you want to be on the planet? So that was, I'm grateful for that. But yeah, and so then because I had the job with the Ibogaine community, and it was Mexico, it wasn't the Amazon, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go. I'm going to go there. And I wanted to know about Iboga. I wanted to understand these things and be a part of it, which, I'm so glad. It's really hard work to be responsible for helping people to heal, no matter what it is, whether you're a nurse here in the hospital or, whatever kind of help you're giving to people. It's hard work. But if you're trying to help someone detox, whoa, it is very much like an exorcism. And it's hard work. And so, but I thought the way that we were doing it in Mexico was very humane because we were in a beautiful home. We had, the windows open. We had good food. We had people who really cared around.
Yeah.
Our group was great. I loved the people I worked with. And there was Christopher Lawrence. I'll mention him. Claire Wilkins. She's still, I believe, in Sayulita or San Pancho. She has a place, Pangea. And Rocky and Asha are in San Miguel de Allende, and I believe they're still called the Awakening in the Dream House. They want to work with providers now. They've paid their dues.
Right.
Really, it's hard. And yeah. I'll let you. I don't want to lead this, but.
Well, I mean, where do you want to go from here? There's so
Well,
much to talk about.
There's so much. Yeah. You had mentioned Kratom. And
Okay.
yeah, I have one video on my channel of a Kratom detox. So the young woman in that video, she was very, I won't say typical, but it often happens this way, that someone just wants to get off of whatever it is. So they take everything and they throw it away, and they give up their selves to changing. They want it so bad. They're so sick of being the way they are, whatever the substance is. And that was her case.
And so, just to clarify, Kratom is just it's more like an opiate. It's a little bit more of a it's not a hallucinogen, right? It's not the same. It's not the super powerful experience, but it can be a replacement if you're getting off opiates. It kind of cuts some of the withdrawal symptoms, and almost like a methadone, but a natural substance that's a little bit maybe easier on the body.
Well, it's been talked about that way. It's an opioid, so it's very similar to an opiate.
Okay.
And people talk about using it for alcohol. I have a family member that worked with it that way, and or getting off another opiate. Well, it's not an opiate, but getting off an opiate. So it has been promoted to be that, but it is highly addictive. And this young woman, what she went through was so horrendous. She did not want it to be filmed, and I don't blame her. Like, I hesitate to film any treatment because it's like an invasion of a sacred space.
Yeah.
But we were trying to help educate, but that actually only became one video, and I didn't follow up on it. I may. But I wanted to give her some time.
I didn't even really realize. I mean, I've heard about people taking Kratom kind of recreationally, and I had heard about people taking it to cut some of these withdrawal symptoms, or even sometimes just to go to sleep. It's not super powerful. But I was actually interested because I didn't realize that, like, if it does become sort of your replacement drug for a heavier addiction and you're taking it for long periods of time, then the withdrawals off of this are going to be pretty rough as well. That was.
Oh, that is very true.
Yeah.
And it has side effects, one of which is discoloration of the skin. Yeah, the skin becomes, it's toxic to the liver. If you, again, everything's dosage, tobacco is a plant that was used as a digestive. A lot of the shamans down in Peru, they're like always smoking mapacho. That's like the heirloom tobacco. I mean,
interesting.
The tobacco that we, even in American spirit, the natural, organic, that's still hybridized tobacco. It's not mapacho. Now, I don't know if you were, overusing mapacho. I think that would probably hurt you. But, it is a sacred plant, tobacco. And there are people who work with it as a sacrament. Yeah.
It's always so interesting that many of the plants that are sacred plants are also addictive or have these darker sides to them. Although interesting that I don't ever think of the hallucinogens as addictive, really. I guess it's possible, but it's
actually, you've made a point that many people in the biz, in the ethno biz, they point out, like, hey, man, people aren't usually, robbing houses or ripping people off to get enough money to get some psilocybin or some peyote, and you're usually not addicted because, let's face it, you may be throwing up. You may have a trip that is so confrontational. It's not a party. It's not like ecstasy, or I don't know. LSD can even be very rough. It can make you throw up. But it's man-made. I don't judge it, but I do have a certain, respect for the entheogens that Mother Nature has provided without any interference from humans.
Yeah.
So I think, those are not causing habits, they're not causing people,
Right.
in general. I think there are people who think because I've taken 100 ayahuasca trips, so I'm so evolved.
Right.
There's also that kind of, there can be reverse snobbery or thinking that that's the way, which is actually made me kind of quiet about a lot of stuff that I feel helped me, because I don't really think that it's my job to promote it. But I feel that it is kind of my job to defend the validity of it,
Right.
and also to stress the people to do it with a sitter who's a qualified sitter, or at the very least, if you can't find that, set it up so you're safe.
Well, that was something that I wanted to bring up. I know, like, Timothy Leary would always talk about set and setting, and it seems like a lot of what you
Mhm.
were probably doing in Mexico with the Ibogaine was, having the set and setting, make sure it was a safe environment, make sure
Oh
there was
yeah.
somebody there that could help kind of lead, the initiate through the
Hmm.
process, because you get so discombobulated. And if you don't want
Yes.
anything to put you into a bad space. You want to feel like you're in a safe space during something like that. So,
Yes. There's a lot to know. You don't want to be on certain drugs,
uh,
especially like MAO inhibitors or SRRIs. It's like
oh,
you're
wow.
taking,
Interesting.
oh
Yeah.
no, oh my
Right.
gosh, because basically, let's say, well, Ibogaine works this way too. You cannot be on these, I'll call them, for lack of a better word, but antidepressants,
Uh-huh.
these classifications, because okay, what these drugs are doing, in the case of the monoamine, drugs, they're basically doing the same thing ayahuasca is doing, which is they are suppressing your natural suppressors of DMT, because we have DMT floating in the body. They say that it's released from the pineal gland at the
Mm-hmm.
time of death. So what we have is inhibitors in our gut that are keeping the DMT from flooding our system. So
Right.
ibogaine and ayahuasca. So in the case of ayahuasca, it's the vine. They interfere with those inhibitors. So the DMT is flooding in your system, and then the chacruna, which is part of ayahuasca, is an extra little bit of DMT.
It's kind of interesting to think about, because then, maybe consciousness is like this controlled trip, like our whole life, our body is kind of like this controlled DMT experience that we're having. And yeah, when you take these substances, then you're just allowed, a broader view, right? You get
Oh
more,
yeah.
you don't have the inhibitors anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the inhibitors. And, my Ayurveda teacher was telling me, he's Indian, and he said to me, I don't recommend that you do this. When I was telling him, because I was in school to learn the ancient medicine of India, he's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you don't want to go and get your chakra opened. And I'm
Right.
like, but I do. And I told him what happened when I was 23. And he's like, no. That's only supposed to happen when you die. And he said, if you open it, then you're going to have to give it a lot of time to close.
Hmm.
You have to be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another perspective on it. So that's
Yeah.
what happens a lot to people. They're out there in the middle of the woods. They lost their way. They didn't bring any food or a sleeping bag, and they're tripping balls, and then they can really
Right.
get into trouble,
Yeah.
and
Well, and then this kind of goes in, and I really want to touch on this, like why it's illegal in the United States, and then like how many people could be helped
oh, I
from these
know.
addiction issues, or even just from a like shining the light on the whole process, learning from the indigenous and the indigenous ceremonies, how they've used it,
Mm-hmm.
and then figuring out, some kind of path forward in our own culture to be able to use these things to really heal from some of these. I mean, these addiction issues are
Mm-hmm.
all over the place, and they're so difficult to deal with, and people are going to rehabs over and over again. One of the things I've
Mm-hmm.
also even realized, like the 12-step programs that are so common here, and they won't let anybody experiment with these hallucinogenic options. But that I look at it, I even think about it as technology, like the addiction healing technology. And these 12-step programs were invented in like the 1930s. And because
Mm-hmm.
of, I think, because of the drug war, like addiction
Mm-hmm.
therapies haven't really evolved from in the last,
Mm.
almost 100 years or whatever, the last 80 years. It's
That's
unfortunate.
true. Yeah. Yeah. And you can just follow the money all the way through all of
Uh-huh.
our history of our medicine, the American Medical Association with the Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie as donors.
Right.
Meanwhile, pushing away all the naturopathy and midwifery and even chiropractic, herbology, pushing it under because the other stuff could make you money. And now we have a sad situation of just follow the money on all this that's happening in our world
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other can of worms, which I want to allude to because, yes, this is what is happening now. And now it's so sad to me that we have censorship, which is scary. Why can't we talk? Why can't we have debate
Mm-hmm.
about what is happening and what so many qualified people who have been literally censored off Facebook, LinkedIn, scrubbed off Wikipedia? These are not just people like me. These are, people with a track record as like a chief science officer of Pfizer, an epidemiologist, a virologist. These are an immunologist, doctors who are working, all these people are being suppressed. Why
Yeah.
can't we talk?
Right.
Uh,
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to take a quick station break here in the middle of this interview to let you all know that this is where I made the cut for the free version of the shift. If you're interested in seeing the whole thing, please contemplate becoming a subscriber for only $6 a month. You can get the audio version of the extended interview that you're listening to right now. Go to www.theshiftnow.com and click on subscribe, and you will have access not just to the full-length versions of all my episodes, but also I've just started a Facebook group for members only, so you can have contact with me full-time as well as other members of the shift. So it's a pretty good opportunity. If you want the full-length video versions of all my interviews, I have them posted on Rockfin, which you can join for just $9.99 a month. Go to rockfin.com, look up The Shift with Doug McKenty. You can subscribe from there. And for your membership to Rockfin, you also get access to premium content from hundreds of other content providers. So that's a pretty good deal. So you should think about doing that. All right. Thanks, everybody. And please think about supporting the show. I hear you. I mean, what's funny is that, I guess I would have thought, or that this conversation was going to be kind of like a celebration, or let's have a party and take some mushrooms kind of conversation. And it really isn't like that, though, is it? Like, it's actually very realistic.
well,
the
it
whole
could be. Hey,
experiment.
it could be. It could be a
Hmm.
total party setup, and it often is.
Yeah.
And hey, I think this life should be like a musical theater. You wake up and you sing to your neighbor, and
Right.
whatever. You're a clown. You pull down your pants and whatever. It's we should have more like effusive energy where you know. I don't know if you're familiar with Martin Ball. I like his demonstrations of the 5-MeO DMT and how his body just suddenly is moving. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
yes, we are like little, we're all tightened up from all this fear and divisiveness and
Right.
having to beat off, win. And God,
Well,
humans are just tortured.
I mean, I
you know.
have been starting to look at things like long term. So many of us have been participating, not in ceremonial cultures, which understand a lot of what we've been talking about. But our families have participated in this kind of this colonizing event for generations and generations, and where the emphasis has been on work hard, get the work done, don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually very traumatic. I mean, especially if you've had a father who was in a wartime
Mm-hmm.
situation, or you yourself, or
Mm.
your grandfather, or your great grandfather, or your great great grandparent that was traumatized by the Civil War, and they never healed, and they just passed those traumatic experiences down until
Mm-hmm.
we're just like, I think a lot of people in this culture are just like almost like time bombs, of
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress, super
Yes, because we
levels of
carry that.
anxiety and addiction
Yeah.
issues.
It's in our genes, literally.
Right.
All that memory of our ancestors is right there within us. We don't know how to access it, but it's there. And we are the end result.
Mm-hmm.
We are born from, I once heard this guru, it was a Rinpoche, a Tibetan guy, say, "Oh, we're born from the anger of our father and the greed of our mother."
Nice. Yeah.
Nice guy. He's funny.
Right.
I really enjoyed his essays, but I thought, yeah, and if you look at the sex act, it could appear that way, you know. So I'll just leave that. That might be
Right. We
a
can leave
great
that there.
a great closing thought, but it's funny, you got to laugh.
Right.
And we thank God for our sacred clowns that have been beheaded, off with their head, and we have a lot of comedians in our culture who have been, yeah, figuratively beheaded, censored. Oh no, that's just yeah. So we need to feel. We're human beings. We need to feel from our heart. And yeah, there's no easy, I suppose, solution, but we could start at least if we could talk about it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it could 200-300 years, it'll be fine, Dad.
Yeah. No worries. No worries. Just a couple 100 years. We'll get through this.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
that sounds like a plan, Mary. Do you want me to I can tell people to find out more at the Accidental Psychonaut?
Well, thanks for plugging my channel. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been on there in a year and a half, but
Okay.
I am going to go back. I mean, yes. And if people wanted to contact me about Ibogaine, actually, Richie volunteered, so I could give you his phone number.
Well, that was the ibeginagain.org. I'll definitely post
Yes,
that. And that was
ibeginagain.org. And then there's the Awakening in the Dream House, which is Rocky and Asha Caravelli. They're interested in training providers and maybe psychospiritual work. They're not doing heavy duty detox, according to what Rocky told me
okay.
a couple days ago. And then there's Claire Wilkins, who I believe is in Sayulita, and she is dealing with detox. Her site, I believe, is Pangea Biomedics. Her name is Claire Wilkins. And unfortunately, one of my favorite providers, I think he may not be working at the moment, but his name is Christopher Lawrence. And he's a very good provider. And there are many that I do not know. So they're
Yeah.
certainly not limited to that. But
Well, sounds great. Thanks for coming on the
hey,
show.
Doug, thank you.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, it's a
And
topic that's worthy of a lot of discussion, and I really appreciate your
mm-hmm.
experience. Um,
Oh, thank you.
and
Thank you
so
so much.
letting people know that ibogaine and these other entheogens are out there, and
Mm-hmm.
they do provide these healing properties, is important. So I'm glad
Yes,
we could do this.
me too.
So let me just close out by letting everybody know that you've been listening to The Shift with Doug McKenty, and I am your host, and that would be Doug McKenty. And you can find out more about my stuff at www.theshiftnow.com. You can sign up for the feature-length versions of the episode, subscribe to the newsletter, and find a lot of free content under the free content tab. So check it out. And then you can see me at Doug McKenty on Facebook. I'm also at The Shift with Doug McKenty on YouTube. I guess I'm sending more and more people to the Odyssey or Doug McKenty on Rockfin for all the video stuff, because you don't get censored on those channels. So, somebody still believes in free speech around here.
Oh, so, good. Yes. I'll have to talk to you about that.
Right.
I think my channel may have to go there.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Well, cool. So everybody check that out. And thank you very much, Mary, for the conversation. And if you are suffering from an addiction issue, or you have a family member, then I hope you learned something, and certainly do some research on the Ibogaine topic, because it has helped people out. It's never an easy situation, but people are learning all the time how to try to, help as best they can to make that transition back to health. So thanks again, Mary, and thanks for your work in the Ibogaine field, and for coming on and telling your story. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Great.
And there you go, people. That was my talk with Mary Ditton. I've been wanting to have someone on for a long time to talk about the psychedelic experience, and I have, of course, been thinking about sort of getting someone like maybe a Dennis McKenna on. I've certainly read a fair amount of Terence McKenna's work, and having a conversation kind of on that level. And then I just happened to meet Mary here at a community event. She's a local friend of mine now, and we started talking, and she explained her life path and the concept of the Accidental Psychonaut to me, and it just seemed like it would be a great introduction on this program to start having this conversation. So I was really happy to have her on. I'm not exactly sure, when you're talking about the psychedelic experience, that having a PhD, really is the kind of credential that you need to have an in-depth conversation. And a person with Mary's life experience and her passion for the topic is maybe the perfect person to have on, really, to talk about this. You don't need a piece of paper or a certification to get licensed in being a psychonaut. So I was really happy to have her on, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I've had some of my own personal experiences, of course, over the ages. When I was younger, I had a couple of profound ones that were really cool, opened my eyes to the possibility of these things as tools. I do, nowadays, doing Tai Chi, doing sweat lodge ceremony and things like that. I don't typically participate with the psychedelic ceremonies, although I have done the Peyote ceremony a couple of times. I don't think it's a necessary part of a path, but I think that it can, in a lot of cases, really jumpstart a person who's colonized into having a kind of an awakening experience to an alternative perspective. And Mary's on-the-ground experience with the Ibogaine treatment protocols in Mexico was really crucial, I think, to understand that these plant medicines do have a place in our pantheon of healing medicines. The fact that Ibogaine is Schedule 1 here in the United States and can't be studied in terms of its healing potential, especially against addiction, is, I think, really unfortunate, and speaks to the broader concept of healthcare freedom that Mary and I really talked about. That's been, of course, an overarching theme here in the last year and a half, having the freedom to choose our own treatment protocols and how we're going to deal with viruses in our own way, or with sickness in our own way in general. And it really kind of hit home for me, having this conversation with Mary, that this really includes the whole pantheon of entheogens as well. So many people see a great value in having this experience. Many cultures throughout the history of humankind certainly have utilized these things, not just for healing, but for initiation. As I discussed with Mary a bit, the Ibogaine root extract has been used for generations and generations in Africa by some tribes to perform this initiation experience, to allow individuals to go from a childhood into adulthood by having this kind of psychedelic experience. And I think that these initiation rituals are really important. A lot of people in our culture are sort of floundering for many, many years as they grow into adulthood, not really having that clear delineation that sometimes these plant medicines maybe can help make that transition for people, so that they can really recognize that now they've entered into adulthood, and they're part of the community, and their voice counts equally amongst all the other adults. So another important use for these kinds of substances. It was interesting to hear her stories because they weren't all super positive. I guess I was expecting to have someone on who would just kind of cheer on how the psychedelic experience just opened your mind and changed your life forever, and it was all unicorns and fairy tales after that. But Mary's stories were very realistic about the fact that you're not always just going straight to heaven when you have one of these experiences, and oftentimes you have to face your fears and your traumas and work through some difficult situations. And these powerful experiences help you to face those, and they're not always super fun. It doesn't take away from the potential for real healing, and when you have these experiences in that ceremonial setting, especially with someone to help you, then they can manifest in profound positive changes in your life, whether or not the experience is pretty rocky, as you go through it, especially with some of these more powerful ones like the Ibogaine experience and the Ayahuasca experience. So it was interesting. And she also, I wish that Ibogaine was just some, like a one-trick wonder where you can take some of this stuff and then you never want to touch drugs again, right? But unfortunately, it's just not that easy, and you can kind of hear some of the frustration in her stories, in that, some people have to do it once, twice, 3 times, and it still requires that emotional work after the experience to really recover from any kind of addiction situation that you or a loved one might find yourself in. Because you get back home after you've had the ceremony or the healing experience, and you're surrounded by all of those triggers and your drug dealers and everything else, and you still have to make it through life on your own. So there is certainly still a lot of emotional work. It's not just as easy as taking a pill, but nonetheless, there were a lot of it definitely creates a break. It breaks that addiction cycle, and it gives you a chance if you choose to take it. So I think there is a lot of positive value, especially with the Ibogaine and addiction. And again, I think it's just really unfortunate that we don't live in a society that has the freedom for us as individuals to choose how we're going to deal with our own personal healthcare issues. I just start to imagine what it would be like in a world where instead of enforcing treatment protocols from this top-down system, we were really allowed to just have conversations with our healthcare providers and make choices for ourselves based on informed consent, and certain medications weren't prevented from being used if that was the direction that we wanted to go in. I mean, I think actually it would just be a phenomenal and profoundly different world. Like we could really live in a healthy society, and instead, clearly our current healthcare system prevents us from accessing cheap and easy and effective medications in a lot of cases, and imposes pharmaceutical medications that typically require a lifetime of use. Certainly they're profitable for the big pharmaceutical corporations, but not at all actually healthy for the long term inside of our personal lives and in the lives of the members of our community that really could find very low cost health care if we did have that option. So if anything, I think that's what I've taken away from this conversation, is just it reinforced my idea that living in a free society, especially when it comes to healthcare, could be really transformative. We might be amazed at the happy, healthy, long lives that many of us could be living if we weren't forced into these treatment protocols based on profit and instead based on actual efficacy. But again, just to talk about the psychedelic experience, it's just another one of those things. I mean, what kind of a world would we live in? I know, people like Timothy Leary writing way back in the 60s about how these substances can be used to help and transform, and if we could just go to a place. Another thing that Mary and I discussed a bit was about set and setting. Having a professional sit with you while you have an experience like this. I mean, people here in the United States, where we're not allowed to do these kinds of things above ground, oftentimes you're taking things by yourself or taking things with a group of people that don't really know what's going on, and they are powerful substances. And it's so unfortunate that we don't have the ability to go to a professional who really has experience with dealing with these powerful medications and helping you to utilize them to their maximum, while also being there for you to make sure that the experience is as safe and pleasant as possible. So just another aspect of this society that we're living in right now, where we have these options, and these options have been chosen by cultures throughout thousands of years of human experience to the great benefit of their communities, and just simply unfortunate that in the patriarchal cultures they really frown upon it. I think there is actually something deeper going on behind the scene, where the patriarchal culture needs you to believe in the authority of the hierarchy, and I think that these entheogens really break that down. For those of you who've had an experience yourself, you probably understand that it's very individuating, and it really kind of separates your sense of understanding of things from this patriarchal authority, this hierarchical system, and says, hey, no, you're actually the one having your own individual experience. Check this out, right? And it starts to really tear down your sense of the reality that's been constructed within the patriarchy, and open your mind up to other options. Let me put it to you that way, about thinking about things that maybe those at the top of the patriarchal hierarchy really don't want you to understand that you have. So that, I think, explains a lot about why these patriarchal systems really frown upon the psychedelic experience, and you find them way more often in cultures that are more partnership oriented. But the ones that are dominator oriented, hierarchical, and patriarchal do tend to frown on this. I recommend actually Terence McKenna's Food of the Gods about this, where he describes the difference between the more matriarchal or partnership substances like psychedelics or cannabis, and then the patriarchal ones that are constantly pushed down our throat, like caffeine and nicotine and alcohol, right? And he goes through the history of all of that. So if you want to get a good book on this topic, check that one out, Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. And I just want to thank Mary for coming on the show once again and describing her experience and her personal life experience as she has delved deeply into entheogens and what they can do, and for the time that she took out of her life to help people utilizing Ibogaine to heal from addiction therapies. I think just what an incredible experience to have, and I'm glad that she shared her time with us doing that. You can find more about her on her YouTube channel. She's got, 10 or 20 videos posted there, just kind of describing her experience over a lifetime of experimenting with the variety of substances, and her professional experience with Ibogaine. It is at the Accidental Psychonaut on YouTube, so I urge people to check that out. They're pretty short snippets, and there's a lot of really interesting information in there just about her relationship with entheogens, so you can get a little deeper there. And also, if you've been listening to this, you've been listening to The Shift. I'm your host, Doug McKenty. You can go to www.theshiftnow.com, and you can find all of my shows under the free content tab. There's hours of free content there. Please think about signing up for the newsletter. I'll keep you updated on everything new that's coming out of Doug McKenty Studios, and you can subscribe for the full feature-length versions of each episode there under the subscriptions tab. So think about doing that, and please like, share, and subscribe this. I really do rely on all of you to get this information out there. You are the distribution network, so please do that if you've liked what you've heard. All right, thanks everybody for checking this one out. We'll have some new content coming at you here in the next week, and we'll talk to you again then. Take care, everybody.